Unos- Hello, everyone. My name is Federico. This is Valeria. We come from the University of Chicago. We are doing an internship with Education USA. Today, we'll be presenting to you a webinar about American culture. Feel free to comment. Please tell us where are you watching us from, or any doubts you have. Please feel free to comment that, and we'll try to answer as much as possible. So let's get started. Okay, so before we start, we want to tell you what is Education USA, if you don't know it yet. So we are a global network of advising centers from the US State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. We give unbiased, accurate, and comprehensive information about the full range of accredited US higher education institutions and free access to introductory information on US study. So for those of you who are watching us from Mexico, here in Mexico we have 25 centers, but we have 450 centers worldwide in around 180 countries. So okay, let's begin with the American culture.
All right, so in the US, higher education refers to optional schooling that is done after secondary or high school education. Also known as post-secondary education or higher education, these studies take place in universities and colleges all around the country. Higher education institutions comprise of liberal arts colleges, public universities, for-profit colleges, private universities, and community colleges. American universities and colleges have been ranked among the most prestigious in the world, mostly due to high levels of research and strong funding. If you are hoping to attend a higher education institution in the US, this webinar will hopefully help you gain a better understanding of general US culture so that your transition as you move is a smooth one. So to get us started, we'll be talking about campus living and dorm life, as these are two really important aspects of the US college experience. As far as housing goes, freshman students are usually placed in double rooms, which means that you'll likely have a roommate. Most of the time, colleges have housing questionnaires that they send out to students who have accepted their admission to help match them with a roommate based on how compatible they are. For example, these questionnaires might ask whether you prefer to study in your room or in a library, or if you prefer to play music while you work. It is standard for universities to require freshmen to live on campus, while upperclassmen like juniors and seniors generally move off campus nearby. Although, again, this does vary from school to school and is really largely based on the school's location. While freshman dorm rooms tend to contain the minimum necessities in terms of furniture, that is, they really only have a desk, a bed, closet, and drawers, dorm living does allow for you to meet people from different backgrounds, and this way you get to bond with other students in your grade. To help ensure that the students living in dorms are doing all right, there are RAs and RHs. RAs are resident assistants, and these are essentially peer leaders or resident advisors who supervise those living in the dorms. An RA has many responsibilities, including building a residential community through programming, acting as a sort of counselor for students, being a resource for students who have either academic or institutional questions, and also they're responsible for enforcing residence policies. Similarly, RHs are residence heads, except that they are normally faculty at the university instead of peer students. RHs are also responsible for organizing programming that will help promote dorm culture and dorm spirit and foster good relations.
All right, when it comes to the dining schedules in the US differ immensely from the ones in other countries. Breakfast is normally taken from 7 to 10, depending how early you need to wake up for class. Lunch goes from 12 to 2, and dinner from 5 to 7. Though they are very different from the ones in Mexico and other countries, it is very easy to get used to them. Just give it 1 week or two. The dining halls normally work as buffet, having a wide variety of food that changes for every meal every day. It is not only comprised by American food, though that is what dominates. More than eating, meals are a time to meet with friends and catch up. It is also very easy to meet new people there or find someone you hadn't seen in a long time. Now, let's talk a bit about academics. As far as academics goes, classes in the United States are very different from the ones you might be used to. Firstly, there are seminar-based classes. In these classes, the students are assigned to read or watch something and then discuss it in class. The professor will have little to no intervention in those discussions, since students themselves are supposed to lead the discussion and learn from each other's opinions and comments. Secondly, there are lectures. Lectures are perhaps the most typical type of class you'll find anywhere. In lecture-style classes, the professor talks and explains the topic of the day, and students participate if they have doubts. Thirdly, there are laboratories. These usually last longer than any other class and are focused in the scientific field. In terms of grading, colleges tend to use letters instead of numbers. Additionally, each letter accounts for a value that ranges from 0 to 4, which is reflected in the GPA, which means grade point average. Now, students have access to many resources that will help them keep up with the academics. Libraries, for instance, are usually immense and have a great set of resources such as books, magazines, databases, and computers. Additionally, it is the perfect place for people to gather and form study groups to help each other. Office hours are also of great value for students. The office hours are specific hours that the teacher of each course sets for students to walk in and ask questions, or talk about a paper, or just talk in general. The office hours are also given by the TAs. The TAs stand for teaching assistant, and these people are usually graduate students who work as tutors in each class. These are very helpful, especially if it is difficult to understand the professor. Then they will have another way of explaining the topics that might work better for you.
Okay, so another really enriching aspect of the college experience in the US is the diversity factor that most colleges across the country have. The diagram here refers specifically to the demographics of the University of Chicago, but each university has statistics for their own campus. Here we can see that about 44% of the student body at the university is white, which means that there is a significant amount of diversity in the student body. The diversity of the student body is really reflected in the classroom, where students from different ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds are able to share, compare, and contrast their ideas. Everyone brings something different to the table, and having this really makes discussions more productive. So while most of your time will be occupied by your studies, your undergrad college experience in the US will be shaped just as much by the activities you become involved in as it will be by what you learn in the classroom. Some popular activities that students participate in include sports, debate, Model UN, pre-professional clubs, arts, community service, and fraternities or sororities. Schools will normally have fairs for clubs and student activities each semester. In these fairs, each student organization or club sets up a booth with at least one or two members so that students can walk around, see which organizations appeal to them, and then talk to current members of the organization. These fairs are really the best way to become aware of the different types of activities for students on campus.
Now, as she mentioned, fraternities and sororities are some of the biggest activities in colleges. Everything related to fraternities and sororities is encompassed under the label of Greek life. These organizations are generally portrayed only as party hosters, which most of the times is true. However, they are much complicated than this. Some of these organizations are oriented towards specific fields. For instance, there are business fraternities whose goal is to prepare students to undertake a business career. There are others which just do community service and are constantly traveling to marginalized zones to help those communities. In general, however, most of them will participate in some sort of philanthropic event, which is normally a fundraiser. Additionally, all of them have a huge network. Sometimes they can contact not only alumni of that university that were members of that organization, but also members of the same organization in other universities across the US. The process of joining is not simple either, and it covers many stages that are sometimes misunderstood. The rushing process refers to that in which the student gets to know the people and the organization and vice versa. The bidding corresponds to a period where the organization sends the bids, which are the invitations to join the organization. Of course, as almost any activity in college, these are very selective, so not everyone will be offered to join. And unlike other activities, however, to join fraternities or sororities, you would have to pay a fee. Now, once the invitation is accepted and the fee is paid, the member undergoes the pledging process, where they are expected to learn about the organization's values and bond with the members. Now, another activity that is sometimes done by fraternities is strolling, which consists of a choreographed dancing, and here we will see some examples of it. All right, we hope that made it clearer. So now let's move on to time management.
Okay, so for most students, college is really the first time that they are afforded a lot of freedom. But with this freedom also comes a lot of new responsibilities. And beyond getting all your work done, another huge responsibility is making a schedule and planning out your coursework after you decide what your major is. Most US colleges and universities use online platforms that allow students to bid and enroll for classes. And while you will be assigned an advisor who will help you plan out those classes, it is still largely up to you to manage all your other activities and make sure you maintain a well rounded lifestyle that includes time for exercise, studying, having a social life, eating, extracurricular activities, and work. So here we have a sample student schedule that, as we can see, contains several introduction courses or freshman classes. It is typical for students on a semester calendar to take 5 or 6 different courses, as is the case in the example we are seeing here, while students who are on the quarter system generally only take 3 or 4 courses. And this is because the semester calendar only contains 2 grading periods, while the quarter system is split up into 3.
Okay, so in case you are concerned about how a university looks like or where it is located, this page will be of great help for you. Here you can explore some of the variations in architecture and facilities among US universities and get a better idea of how living in a US university would look like. So as you can see, you can search by school name, state, or country. So don't hesitate in using it. It is a great tool, especially to get to know the colleges you want to apply for. Now, let's move on from college life to talk about some of the traditions and festivities that are celebrated in the US. Most of these may already be quite common in the rest of the world, aren't they? However, the impact is not as strong. So let's start with Halloween. Halloween is celebrated on October 31st, and houses are heavily decorated. Usually, there are also costume parties at the night, and right before that, kids usually tend to go on people's houses to ask for treats. If kids do not receive candies, they tend to do tricks to the people who did not give them anything. That's why when they knock, they shout, "Trick or treat."
Okay, so now we're going to be moving on the calendar. And the next major holiday that's really important in the US is Thanksgiving. So this holiday originated as a harvest festival, and the event that Americans commonly call the first Thanksgiving was actually celebrated in 1621 by the Pilgrims after the first harvest in the New World. and it became a national holiday in 1863. In the United States, turkey, usually roasted and stuffed but sometimes deep fried, is the typical featured item of any Thanksgiving feast table. So much so that Thanksgiving is commonly referred to as Turkey Day. Mashed potatoes with gravy, stuffing, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, sweet corn, squash, Brussels sprouts, and pumpkin pie are commonly associated with Thanksgiving dinner. As a result of the size of Thanksgiving dinner, Americans eat more food on Thanksgiving Day than any other day of the year. At home, it is a holiday tradition in many families to begin the Thanksgiving dinner by saying grace. So, another interesting event that happens right after Thanksgiving is Black Friday. And Black Friday has routinely been the busiest shopping day of the year in the US since 2005. Most major retailers open very early as overnight hours, and offer promotional sales. It is common for prospective shoppers to camp out over the Thanksgiving holiday in an effort to secure a place in the front of the line and thus get a better chance at getting their desired items. Okay, so Cinco de Mayo and St. Patrick's Day are interesting holidays in the US because neither one pertains particularly to US history or culture. However, they are both more celebrated in the US than they are in their countries of origin. Neither Cinco de Mayo or St. Patrick's Day are official US holidays, but nonetheless they have been very much commercialized in the US and are often celebrated with parades and parties. The largest Cinco de Mayo celebration takes place every year in Los Angeles, and usually there's a lot of Tex-Mex food involved, as well as margaritas and Mexican beer. It is also not uncommon for people in the US to mistake Cinco de Mayo for Mexican Independence Day. St. Patrick's Day, on the other hand, is celebrated mostly in New York City. And many cities like Chicago, as we can see in this picture featured below, have a tradition of dyeing the river green, which normally lasts about a day or so. There are also parades with bagpipes and traditional dances, and people will normally drink whiskey, Guinness, and green beer.
Now, perhaps the most American day out of all is the 4th of July, which corresponds to the Independence Day of the US. Now, during the day, there are several parades, followed by fireworks that go on for all the night. Families normally gather outside to cook some barbecue. And finally, another festivity which might differ from all the others is the Super Bowl. Believe it or not, that game is the most watched television broadcasting every year in the US. It usually takes place the last Sunday of January or the first Sunday of February. People tend to watch the game in big groups, and even people who don't like football participate in these gatherings because either they want to see the halftime show and the special commercials that are featured throughout the game, or just to hang out with everyone. The halftime shows normally highlights very successful artists. Previous years have included Beyoncé, Prince, Coldplay, Katy Perry, and many more artists. So now let's take a look to how these celebrations are conducted. Alright, now let's take a look to um, the next thing that we're talking about, that is the costumes of the US.
Okay, so some customs in the US that are different from those here in Mexico are the unit measurements, for example. So, unlike in Mexico, in the US, feet are used instead of meters, miles are used instead of kilometers, and pounds are used instead of kilos. The weather is also given in degrees Fahrenheit, not degrees Celsius, so these are measurements that you'll have to get used to. When it comes to social situations, it is more common not to shake hands upon meeting and simply to smile and say hi. However, within business context, handshakes are generally expected when meeting and leaving. People are a lot less likely to greet each other with a kiss on the cheek unless they are direct family, but even this is somewhat rare. Americans also tend to be pretty punctual, so if you have a meeting at a certain time, arriving on time means that you will be there a few minutes before the meeting starts. And as far as tipping in restaurants goes, the standard tip of 15% is usually given as a baseline tip, regardless of service, and more can be given for exceptional service. Although many restaurants will automatically charge you the tip if you are a group of more than 4 or 5. So make sure to check your bill at the end of a meal to see if you've already been charged.
Okay, now one activity that is very common in the United States is tailgating. A tailgate party is a social event held on the trunk of a vehicle. Tailgating usually occurs before a concert or a sports game, in the respective parking lots or arenas, and can go on for hours before the event actually starts. Parking lots get filled with tons of trunks where there is usually food and the other elements needed for the event. Now let's watch a clip about a tailgate party from the most American show on earth, which is The Simpsons.
Why do we have to get here so early? The football game doesn't start for hours.
We're not here for the game. The game is nothing. The game is crap. The game makes me sick. The real reason we Americans put up with sports is for this. Behold, the tailgate party, the pinnacle of human achievement. Since the dawn of parking lots, man has sought to stuff his guts with food and alcohol in anticipation of watching others exercise. What childbirth is to women, eating trunk meat is to the bewinged. Hmm?
All right, so that's all we have on American culture. Just to make a recap, if you go to college to the US, these are the things that you should expect. You should expect to have a doll room. You should expect to celebrate Thanksgiving, Halloween. And even if you don't like the Super Bowl, you should watch it. You would need to get used to use the English system instead of the one that you might be used to. But in general, it is very easy to use it, and it is a culture that is very much worth trying to experience someday. So we would like to thank you. If you have any questions, please contact us at educationusa.cdmx@comexus.org.mx if you are from Mexico. If you are not, you should get in touch with your nearest advising center in case you need help. So we will stick around for some minutes in case you have any questions. We would also like to remind you that we are having another webinar next week on standardized testing. So if you have any questions or that, or you want to get to know a bit more about that, you should watch us next Thursday. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and we will answer promptly. Okay, so we are looking at some questions. Luis Aldair is asking if I don't have a general English and if I go to study in the USA and I don't know some words when I'm taking classes, what should you do? Okay, so like I can tell by experience that I don't know all the words in English. I wasn't born in the US and I still went with a fairly good level of English. And classes, well, it might be difficult at first, but in general, you should be able to keep up with them. And yeah, it's not a problem to not know everything.
Yeah, well, I'm from the US. I'm from Chicago. But I guess what I would say is that beyond having trouble with words in your classes, I actually think that the academic side of it wouldn't be too hard to pick up. There are always really great resources online, as well as we mentioned, your TAs and your professors. And you can reach out to them, and they'll be more than happy to help. I would, however, advise like for you to really try to make an effort to hang out with people in a social setting, because there's a lot of contextual things that you'll get from interacting with people your own age that might be harder to understand right off the bat.
Okay, so they're asking how much time a class normally lasts. Well, it depends. Seminar classes are usually longer than lectures because, I mean, it's very tiring for the professor to just talk for like 2 hours. In our case, our classes last normally like 1 hour and a half, the seminars, the lectures only like an hour, and laboratories tend to last around like 3 hours.
Yeah, so it'll come down to how many times a week the class meets. But generally, the classes are supposed to have the same amount of meeting time over the course of a semester or a quarter. So, for example, if the class meets 3 times a week, it probably won't last more than 50 minutes to an hour. And if the class only meets twice a week, then that's when you're looking at classes that will last, an hour and 20 minutes up to an hour and a half.